They walked in together, and the room fell so silent it felt as if even the security camera stopped recording. Two young men, identical down to their posture, slipped into the courtroom with the quiet assurance of people who had never waited in line for anything in their lives. Their clothes were expensive, but plain, not a single logo, yet every thread announced privilege. People in the gallery, mostly older locals who came early to dispute parking tickets, straightened in their seats. These weren't the usual defendants who shuffled in with apologies ready. These two looked around as if someone had invited them to critique the decor. They moved in perfect unison. Same stride, same faint smirk, same slow exhale as they sat. And then the whispering started, not among the spectators, but between the brothers themselves. Something about the court's ceiling lights, something about the chairs. A private comedy routine performed in low tones. A few seniors frowned. Disrespect in a courtroom lands hard on people accustomed to showing it. Judge Caprio read the file. 4 parking violations near an elementary school. All within 1 week. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated. But he raised an eyebrow. 4? At the same exact location? He folded his hands. You two share the same car? It should have been an easy question, yet their rhythm faltered. The older twin answered first. He didn't bother hiding the impatience in his voice. Yeah, sometimes. Depends. The younger added something similar, only softer, almost unsure. Their answers overlapped, contradicted each other, and then stopped abruptly, leaving an odd, uneasy quiet behind. The judge tapped a key, and the monitor brightened with photos from the violations. The car appeared clear as day. Same color, same scratches on the bumper. The older twin leaned back, amused. That's definitely not us, Judge. A few people in the room exchanged looks, not mocking, incredulous. One man let out a breathy chuckle he tried to swallow. The judge didn't respond. His eyes stayed on one of the images, zooming slightly. On the passenger side mirror, the reflection caught a pair of silhouettes. Blurry, but unmistakably 2 figures, close together, both leaning forward in the same posture the twins had when whispering moments ago. A ripple moved through the gallery. A soft wave of murmurs, headshakes, quiet disbelief. The younger brother shifted in his seat. His foot tapped once, then stopped when his brother nudged him. Judge Caprio looked up at them, calm but sharpened somehow. These photos were taken minutes apart on different days, he said, and the reflection, well, it suggests more than one person inside the vehicle. The humor drained from the brothers' expressions. Not entirely, but enough that the room sensed a shift. An unspoken tension settled, widening the gap between their casual arrogance and the plain wooden benches of a small municipal courtroom. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Something in the air tightened, as if the case had just stepped out of the shallow end and found deeper water beneath it. The younger twin glanced at the exit for a fraction of a second. The older straightened his shoulders defiantly. Their synchronized confidence, the thing that defined them when they walked in, no longer felt quite so seamless. And the room, filled with people who'd lived long enough to read trouble the moment it entered the door, knew this wasn't just about parking anymore. The judge let the photographs fade from the screen before speaking again. Let's step back for a moment, he said. Tell me who I'm talking to. The older twin answered instantly, as if he'd practiced the line. We run operations for our family's company. Our dad built half this block. The statement landed with a dull thud in the room. Not hostile, just tone-deaf. A few people exchanged glances, the kind that say, There it is, the entitlement they'd sensed the moment the brothers walked in. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, studying them not as defendants but as young men revealing more than they meant to. The brothers seemed to expect recognition to bloom across the courtroom, but nothing of the sort happened. Instead, the moment flattened, exposing their assumption that names and money carried weight everywhere they went. The older twin sat tall, speaking as though he were clarifying a simple fact. The younger echoed his posture, but couldn't quite hold it. His shoulders tightened, then eased, then tightened again. Every time the judge's gaze shifted toward him, he blinked too fast, as if reconsidering his own role in their shared story. Caprio turned to him. "And you? Same position in the company?" A beat passed, the first real hesitation of the morning. "I help manage the schedules," he said. His voice lacked the polished confidence of his brothers. It carried a trace of someone used to following rather than leading. The older twin added quickly, almost covering for him, "We do everything together, always have." But that wasn't entirely true, and everyone could feel it. Then came the slip, small but significant. The judge asked why their car had been near the school multiple times that week. The younger brother spoke before his sibling could intercept. "We were just dropping someone off." He froze the second the words left his mouth, as if realizing he'd opened a door they'd agreed would stay shut. The older twin shot him a look sharp enough to complete the sentence he didn't want said. The room sensed the tension instantly, the kind that coils between family members who are hiding something inconvenient. Caprio didn't press yet. He let the silence linger, calm and patient, the way he often did when someone revealed more in a single sentence than in a full testimony. "You mentioned your father's company," he said finally. "Anything going on this week that makes these violations more sensitive?" That question struck home. The older brother shifted his weight, choosing his words too cautiously for someone pretending this was all trivial. "Our dad's up for a major city contract," he said. "He doesn't need distractions right now, especially not us sitting in court." The younger nodded, but his agreement felt automatic, not sincere. The courtroom picked up on the undertone immediately. This wasn't about fines. It was about image, not theirs, but their father's. A family operating under pressure, where mistakes were liabilities, and silence was currency. A woman in the back row murmured, "So that's what this is," just loud enough for a few to hear. Judge Caprio didn't react outwardly, but the weight of the brothers' admission settled into the room. Their polished clothing and synchronized movements no longer read as mere arrogance. They now looked like young men shaped by expectations they never asked for. One hardened by them, the other burdened. "Let me ask you plainly," the judge said. "Is there anything about that week I should know before we continue?" The older twin opened his mouth, ready with another controlled, dismissive reply, but the younger beat him to it. "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. A fragile word, brittle at the edges. And in that instant, the judge, the gallery, everyone understood the same thing. Whatever truly happened near that school was not part of the story the brothers intended to tell. Judge Caprio turned a page in the file, not dramatically, just enough to signal a shift. "I have another document here," he said. "This one wasn't part of your original citation packet." The brothers went still. "It's a written complaint," the judge continued, "submitted by the principal of the school you were parked in front of." A faint rustle moved through the courtroom. The older twin's expression tightened, the first crack in his polished composure. Caprio read aloud, his voice steady. "These two young men repeatedly blocked our drop-off zone. When staff approached the vehicle, they refused to move and laughed. The word laughed echoed. A grandmother in the front row shook her head, her lips pressed thin with disapproval. The older brother leaned forward. "That's not true," he replied sharply. "We never even got out of the car." The judge paused. He hadn't asked whether they stepped out of the vehicle. The statement hung there, exposing more than the brothers intended. The younger twin realized it first. His jaw tightened as he glanced toward his sibling, a brief flash of alarm crossing his face. Judge Caprio set the complaint down, with careful precision. "I didn't ask where you were standing," he said. "I only asked about the complaint." A low ripple of reaction moved across the room. Not loud, just enough to show the audience had caught the misstep. The younger twin shifted, as if bracing for a question he wasn't sure he could answer. He opened his mouth, hesitated, and closed it again. For the first time, the symmetry between the brothers faltered. The judge pulled up another photograph, this one taken from a different angle. The car was unmistakable, but something else stood out now. A blurry outline of someone in the back seat, barely visible behind the headrest. The figure's posture wasn't youthful. Shoulders rounded, head slightly bowed. Caprio narrowed his eyes. "There appears to be a third person in the vehicle." The older brother responded too quickly. "That's probably a shadow." But the younger's reaction betrayed him. His gaze snapped to the screen with a kind of startled recognition he couldn't hide. The judge examined their faces in silence, as though measuring the distance between what they claimed and what the evidence suggested. Out in the gallery, someone muttered, "Something's off here." Another replied softly, "You can feel it." Caprio folded his hands. "Let me ask again," he said. "Who were you dropping off?" The older twin opened his mouth, but no sound came. His certainty was gone. The courtroom watched as he tried to recover the confident posture he'd worn since entering the room, but the moment had slipped beyond his control. The younger brother's foot tapped once against the floor, a sharp, involuntary beat. His eyes flickered, not toward his brother this time, but toward the judge, a silent admission that he knew the question wouldn't disappear. Still, neither answered. The silence that followed was different from the earlier tension. This one felt heavier, as if the truth itself were pressing down on the room, waiting to push through the cracks forming between the twins. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "I'll repeat the question only once." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority came from the stillness around him, a stillness that made even the air in the room seem to hold its breath. The brothers exchanged a look. For the first time since entering the courtroom, they did not mirror each other. The older brother's stare carried warning. The younger's held worry. And the gallery, people who'd spent decades reading people far more complicated than these two, understood. Whatever they had been hiding near that school was about to pull the entire case into deeper territory. Before either brother could assemble an answer, the courtroom door opened a crack. The clerk stepped inside, carrying a tablet with both hands, as if unsure whether she should interrupt. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "the principal just sent over a video. Timestamp matches the week of the violations." Judge Caprio gestured for it. The clerk set the tablet before him, he adjusted his glasses and tapped play. The screen brightened, reflecting across the polished wood. The footage was simple. A school security camera pointed toward the curb. The brothers' car glided into view, unmistakable in color and shape. But the moment the rear door opened, the room's attention shifted as if pulled by a single thread. An elderly man stepped out, slowly, uncertainly, using a cane to steady himself. His movements were deliberate, the way someone adjusts to the world after an illness. His coat hung loosely around his shoulders. He looked vulnerable, exposed to the cold morning air. The younger twin inhaled sharply. The older twin blinked once, jaw tightening as though bracing for impact. No one in the room spoke. Even the usual courtroom creaks and shuffles faded. The video showed the twins in the front seats, not turning back, not waiting for the man to gain his balance. The car pulled away almost before he closed the door, leaving him alone on the sidewalk, wobbling slightly as he tried to orient himself. Caprio let the silence expand. The older brother finally said, "That's our driver." The words landed flat, flimsy, against what everyone had just witnessed. The judge played the clip again, this time slowing it slightly. Near the end, the elderly man approached a passing parent, raising a hand for help. His voice, though faint, was captured by the microphone. "My nephews will be right back." The courtroom reacted not with noise, but with stillness, a kind of stunned quiet that revealed more than any outburst could. A few spectators closed their eyes. Others looked at the twins as if seeing them for the first time. The older brother's composure frayed. His fingers curled against the table, knuckles whitening. The younger stared at the floor, guilt flickering like a pulse beneath his calm veneer. Judge Caprio exhaled softly. "That man is not your driver." Neither brother argued. He continued, voice measured, but edged with disappointment. "He called you his nephews. He waited for you to return." The older twin swallowed hard, then attempted a controlled tone. "You don't understand our family situation, Judge." But the explanation had lost its footing before it started. The younger brother finally spoke, voice cracking at the edges. "He didn't want our father seeing him that day. There were city officials at the office. Dad said it. It wouldn't look right." The room shifted, a collective realization settling over the gallery. This wasn't a simple parking scheme or a moment of arrogance. This was something rooted deeper. Image over dignity, appearance over kinship. Judge Caprio studied them both, then looked back at the frozen frame on the tablet. The elderly man standing alone, trying to steady himself with his cane. "So you left him at an elementary school," the judge said softly, "to keep him out of sight." The older brother flinched. The younger's shoulders slumped, as though the weight he'd been carrying had finally become too heavy to disguise. Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The truth had already filled every inch of the room. What began as 4 parking violations had transformed into something entirely different. A portrait of a family fracture, a man hidden away, and 2 young men caught between obedience and conscience. The judge folded his hands. "We're going to address this," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "All of it." And the courtroom understood. The case was no longer about where the car stopped. It was about who these young men chose to leave behind, and why. Judge Caprio let the tablet rest on the bench as if it were something fragile. He didn't speak right away. The gallery was silent, waiting for the tone he would choose. Stern, sympathetic, disappointed, or all at once. When he finally addressed the brothers, his voice held no anger, only a steady sadness that reached farther than reprimand ever could. "This court has seen every kind of mistake," he began. "People running late, people overwhelmed, people who made a poor decision and came here to correct it. But what troubles me today isn't the parking itself." He paused, letting the weight settle. "It's the way you walked away from a man who clearly depended on you." The words struck harder because they weren't delivered loudly. A few people in the gallery shifted, touched by the quiet gravity in his tone. The younger twin rubbed his palms against his knees, trying to keep himself composed, though his breath trembled. Judge Caprio continued, You didn't leave a stranger. You left someone who trusted you enough to call you family. The younger brother's restraint broke. He lifted a hand to his face, not to hide tears, but to steady them, as though overwhelmed by the sudden release of something he'd held in for far too long. He forced out a confession, voice shaking. I didn't know what else to do. Dad said he didn't want him at the office. He said it would distract from the meeting. We thought leaving him near the school would be safer than dropping him downtown. His brother shot him a warning glance, but the words were out, and they rang with a sincerity the courtroom hadn't heard from either of them yet. A murmur spread through the gallery. Not judgment, but a kind of pained recognition. People understood controlling families, impossible expectations, and the way responsibility can warp into fear. The older twin tried to regain control, but his earlier confidence had thinned. We were trying to manage the situation. It wasn't meant to... He didn't finish. The judge raised a hand calmly. Intent matters, yes, but so does presence. And you weren't there when he needed you. The older twin's lips pressed together, his eyes darting toward the screen showing his uncle alone on the curb. For once, he couldn't mask what he felt. Shame, raw, and unguarded. Caprio leaned forward. Is he all right now? The question should have been easy. It wasn't. Neither brother answered. Their silence traveled through the room like a cold draft. The gallery reacted with a mix of disbelief and sorrow. Even those who entered indifferent were now fully invested. The judge inhaled slowly, then delivered his decision. Not sharp, not punitive, but deliberate and pointed. You will take him to a doctor, he said. Not once, consistently. For the next month, you will ensure he has proper care, and you will provide documentation to this court. If he needs transportation, you'll arrange it. If he needs assistance, you'll give it. The brothers looked stunned. The older twin's jaw softened. The younger nodded almost automatically, as if grateful someone was finally telling him what the right thing looked like. As for the fines, Caprio added, you'll pay them. But not because of the traffic violations. He let a moment pass. You'll pay them as a reminder of what happens when people forget their responsibility to the ones who raised them, guided them, or loved them. Several spectators nodded quietly. A man in the back murmured, That's justice, barely above a whisper. The judge closed the file with a soft click, a gesture gentler than his words, yet carrying the finality of a door being drawn shut. The brothers said nothing. They didn't argue, didn't try to negotiate. For the first time all morning, they simply listened and accepted. And in the quiet that followed, the emotional core of the story revealed itself. This wasn't punishment. It was a chance to restore something they had nearly abandoned. For a moment after the ruling, the courtroom lingered in a hush. Not the tense silence from earlier, but a quieter, more contemplative one. The brothers stood there, uncertain. Their once synchronized posture now noticeably uneven. The younger kept his gaze lowered. The older stared fixedly at the judge's bench, as though searching for something he'd never needed from authority before. A woman in the second row, silver hair pulled into a neat coil, eyes sharp with lived experience, spoke softly but firmly into the stillness. Your uncle deserves better than what he got. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The sentence landed with the clean precision of truth. Both brothers flinched. For the first time, they looked not irritated or defensive, but humbled. They collected their paperwork in silence. No whispered jokes. No shared smirk. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, almost weary acceptance. As they approached the exit, the younger twin paused. He turned back toward the bench, not quite meeting the judge's eyes until the last second. "Thank you," he said, barely above a whisper. "No one ever talks to us the way you did." There was no resentment in his tone, only relief, tinged with something vulnerable. The sound of someone hearing guidance instead of criticism for the first time. The older brother lingered a step behind. He didn't speak, but he held the judge's gaze a heartbeat longer than necessary. Gone was the polished, indifferent stare he'd worn at the start. In its place was a look of unsettled recognition, as if he were realizing how fragile the scaffolding around his life actually was. Judge Caprio watched them go, then addressed the room, not loudly, but with a clarity that carried to every corner. "Money can build a city," he said, "but it cannot build a heart. That," he tapped a hand lightly against the bench, "you shape by showing up for the people who count on you." There was no applause. People simply absorbed the words, letting them settle into memory the way older generations do when they recognize wisdom spoken plainly. The clerk began gathering files, the scrape of paper against wood returning the room to its ordinary rhythm. But before she closed the docket, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then approached the bench with unusual urgency. "Judge, you should hear this." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The school principal just called. The uncle never made it home." Caprio's expression shifted, not alarm at first, but a deep, concerned stillness. He straightened slightly, processing the information, sensing its implications long before speaking. The gallery froze, waiting. "Never made it home?" he repeated quietly. The clerk nodded. "They've been trying to reach the family. No one's seen him since that morning." The weight of the revelation hung heavily. The brothers had left the courthouse minutes earlier, unaware of the message now unfolding behind them. A slow chill worked its way across the room. Not fear, exactly, but the unsettling realization that the story they had all witnessed might not be finished. Caprio closed the file again, this time with a measured, deliberate motion, as though sealing not the case, but his own growing concern. His eyes lingered on the empty doorway, where the brothers had exited. The courtroom lights seemed to dim just slightly as the murmur of the spectators returned. Cautious, uncertain, filled with questions no one dared voice directly. And in that half-lit pause, a single thought tightened the air. If the uncle never arrived home, where did he go after they drove away? The screen fades, not with drama, but with the quiet, heavy promise that the truth still waits beyond the courtroom's walls.